Hello! So, the rain in Spain is still falling mainly on our Sierra, but I've just got enough light in my light well. Ooh, the sun's coming out. That won't last long. It's the middle of May and the sun is not shining mostly on the Sierra. And we've had more rain than I know what to do with. And in this light well, occasionally we have drips that come in just about here, and so I'm hoping we don't have a downpour while I'm filming this. So on a wet day, what better way to spend it than making a few flowers? And these are for my Sevillano patio. So I don't really do non-food plants very often, but I decided that I wanted to make some plants for my patio. And these are made, believe it or not, very simply. This one looks extremely complicated, and as if it would take me hours and hours and hours to cut these little fronds. And this one looks as if I would have to spend a lot of time cutting these out, or I would have to have a very specialised cutter. And then I would have to roll the polymer clay, etc. But no, none of that. This is really simple, and it's another way of using the goo, which I showed in my last but one, I can't remember, YouTube. And the key to that one is this thing, which is just a piece of cutting mat. And what I want to do is I want to make a leaf shape. This is very difficult to see, but it's a little plastic leaf shape, just the shape of a Swiss cheese plant, as we call them. And it's extremely simple. As you can see, I've cut out some little heart shapes here. So I'll just take a piece out. In fact, I'll cut most of it off so I don't have to deal with that big thing in front of the camera. So I'm just going to cut out a little heart shape. So when people ask me if I've got a lot of patience, well, they say you must have a lot of patience because I make miniatures. But exactly the opposite is true. I have no patience at all, which is why I'm quite inventive at finding really good ways of avoiding work. So if there's a nasty job needs doing, or a job that I think would take a long time, I'll tend to sleep on it, and then in the morning I'll wake up with the lazy woman's method. And this is the lazy woman's method of making these leaves. So I need to cut out about 6 little indentations in each side. So I'll do this as quickly as I can, but maybe not very accurately, just for you to see. So just simply cutting around and then back, sort of, so it makes a sort of teardrop shape cut out of it. 3, 4. I haven't been able to find my punch because I wanted to put some extra little holes in it, but I haven't been able to find my punch today. So that's not happening, but I might do one like that in the future. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's usually 6 indentations in the side. Different varieties will probably have different ones. So I've just done that one side like that. And this is the first one I did, which was actually not anywhere near as good as this one, but I then did another one which escapes me at the moment. I've shown already on YouTube how to mix the mould making material, and so all you do is make a mould using this former, and as you're doing it, put some kind of a little indentation up the middle so that you've got space to put a piece of wire. And this is how simple this is. You pop the wire in the middle, you take a little bit of previously mixed goo, think this bit might be a bit too thin. I'll use some out of the jar. So if you don't know how to make goo, just skip back to the YouTube video, which is probably entitled something like how to make polymer clay goo, something like that. I did it quite recently, so it shouldn't be far back from this one unless YouTube resort it at some time. I don't know whether that happens. Right, so all you do is take a palette knife and squidge a goodly amount of that onto the, I've got that wire in the wrong place, a goodly amount onto the mould. Don't be afraid of getting a little bit sticky. If you are afraid of getting sticky, this trick isn't for you. If you don't mind a little bit of goo, as I call it, that's fine. So a good bendy palette knife will make it easy for you to remove it from your knife. Now the first time I did it, I tried to remove all the goo from the edge of the mould, but actually it's easier and it looks better if you leave it not too cleaned. So let me put a bit more in that corner. You don't want it too thin because goo does run, but not as much as liquid Fimo. So you don't want it to be too thin at any point because it'll show up. One of those leaves on that one is too thin. I'm not happy with it. So I'll probably redo that one. So a reasonable amount, but you do need to rub it off a little bit so you can at least see those gaps. And you simply bake that in the oven as it is. Now there is a problem with baking liquid polymers into this mould. It does leave a strange sort of powdery coating on the back, but that doesn't matter for leaves like this. In fact, it can look more realistic, so don't worry about that. But just make sure that the side of the leaf that you want to see is the uppermost side. And because it bakes a little bit shiny, you'll have the right effect on your leaves when you've finished. So that's very simple. Now, here's the one that you might think would be extremely difficult. As you can see, it's got tiny little fronds. But this is where my laziness comes in again, and where my observancy comes in, because just round the corner from me, this plant grows. And it comes with its own ready-made beautiful fronds. And if you've already worked with the moulding paste, you'll already know what to do next. And that is take these fronds and press them onto the mould making material carefully, because they are quite delicate, and then just wait for it to cure and you'll end up with a mould like this. I'll just clean it because it's a bit covered in the last lot that I used. So you'll end up with a nice mould like this, which already has, if you use the back first, you'll already have that line in the middle. Now I found with this one that you did need quite a thin goo. It needed to be quite liquid. So you needed a strong colour, a reasonably strong colour, but quite thin, so not too much. I mean, in fact, you could use liquid Fimo with oil colour in it for this job. The reason for that is that the more of the clay you add to the mix, the more inflexible the material is, and on these tiny fronds you need a lot of flexibility. So I have made glue for this, but I've made it very, very thin. This bit here is very thin. And once again, you just add that to the surface. Need to scrape pretty hard because you don't want a lot hanging around on this one. And I'm not sure whether that's very visible, but you should see that you have a frond leaf there. That's one like this middle one, which is quite light in colour. If you want a darker colour like the bottom ones, this one for example, you'll need to add more colour to your mix or use a thicker mix. So I can add a little bit more of this mix in. And don't forget to make several of different shades of these leaves, because the smaller leaves on the Swiss cheese plant, for example, will be a lighter colour. I haven't made a big difference on this, but there is a slight difference. So you can mix some of your previously mixed glues together, mix a light one in with a dark one. The central leaves, as they're sprouting, will often be quite a lot lighter than the outside ones. So try to keep enough on there. You might need to do this a few times before you settle on just the right quantity, because if you put too much in, you don't get the definition in the little fronds, and if you put too little in, they just break off. But that's how I did those. When I first did it, I actually took the whole leaf off the plant and spread it out like this to make the mould. The problem was that they didn't separate very well, and so there was a lot of overlap of these leaves, so only a few of them are actually usable. So it is probably better to do a smaller number per mould and just make more moulds. If you make too few moulds, you're going to spend half your time running backwards and forwards to the oven. So it's worth making enough moulds to do a whole plant at a time in the oven, or maybe 2 or 3 different plants at the same time, so you're not spending a lot of money on electricity. So I hope you enjoy that. That's just one other use of the lovely goo. So speak to you soon.